It was incredibly rare for a dragon to present someone with one of their own feathers. This action reveals a deep and caring affection. Arthur feels his heart grow tender, fully aware of how much cherished him. Ren interrupted his joyful moment by reaching out and tugging on his arm. He examined each of the man's muscles with intense focus, almost as if he was some sort of expert inspector, leaving others to wonder what possible reason he could have for such scrutiny. Ren finished analyzing the situation and instructed Arthur to perform a spell with his right hand. To start, Arthur was to create a stone pillar, ensuring it matched the precise height and exact radius Ren required. Although both ideas go right past him, Arthur still chooses to obey the order and carries it out without hesitation. He proceeded to demonstrate a variety of spells, each representing a different element. He possessed absolute control over each and every element at his disposal. The array of elements spanned from ice to lightning. Aside from the fundamental measurements and calculations, Ren intends for the boy to put his mana abilities to the test in real battle. The man decided to summon one of his golems to assist him. She commands Arthur to swiftly cast a spell toward the target. The boy unleashed a surge of electricity through his spell, yet the woman remained completely unfazed and kept advancing. The golem's swift movement knocked Arthur off his feet, causing his strike to miss its mark entirely. Arthur comes to the frustrating conclusion that he's up against a cunning trickster, and by now he's completely fed up with the vague and confusing training methods. The boy reveals his greatest confidence lies in his ability to control fire and water. He was limited in how many water spells he could cast in this place. Ren realizes that the boy is only 15 years old, which prompts him to decide that the situation now calls for an assessment of manipulation from a distance. Arthur felt a surge of irritation and shot Winsome a sharp, disapproving glance. Prior to beginning the training, there were several unique golems gathered together, and nothing needed to be changed about them. An overwhelming force of golems marched down from the mountain range. Arthur is taken aback by how effortlessly Ren summons such a large number of these grotesque creatures all at once. Ren hopes that Arthur will enjoy handling everyone. The boy swiftly tapped into the power of his realm heart physique and charged forward, determined to take down everyone in his path. The situation resembled a lone warrior standing strong against an entire world ruled by apes. Arthur was outside, fiercely landing blow after blow on his opponents. Soon, the only evidence of the golem's existence is the scattered debris of their shattered forms. As confident as ever, he approached Ren once more, eager to find out what the next challenge would be. The proud instructor feels pleased to see the boy enjoying himself in his unique manner. Now, he plans to have the boy demonstrate some of his physical skills. While Winsome mentioned the boy's talent with a sword, the instructor knows the boy has also picked up hand-to-hand combat techniques. Arthur didn't mind most of it, but what truly annoyed him was having to remain without a shirt. Meanwhile, Ren launched into a lengthy explanation, insisting that his bare chest was crucial for a proper examination. He further assures the boy that there's no need for concern since he isn't attracted to guys, a remark that adds a touch of humor to the situation. Amused by the moment, Ren asks the younger boy to demonstrate his main fighting technique, giving him a playful flick on the nose much like a grouchy uncle might do. Arthur unleashed the power of his distinctive sword. The moment Ren lays eyes on it, he completely falls apart. The guy suddenly burst into loud laughter, encouraging the kid to continue. Arthur believed he was merely being mocked, so he requested the return of the sword. Ren glanced at Winsome, curiosity flickering in their eyes as they questioned silently whether he had been aware of the truth from the very beginning. During the thrilling moment of revelation, everyone recalled that Arthur had been the only one able to draw the sword from its sheath. Ren surprises him by smoothly drawing the weapon with ease. Arthur wonders whether his condition as an Usura is the reason, but he quickly realizes that this explanation does not fit. The true answer remains something different. Ren unexpectedly admits to being the mastermind behind the impressive weapon he possesses. The blade in question was the same one that Arthur had drawn from its sheath for the first time. The author's name was clearly stamped onto its surface. Arthur struggles greatly to make sense of what is happening around him. He is desperate to discover how the weapon ended up in. The blade had originally been crafted by Ren as part of his experiments, but he had eventually dismissed it himself, believing it to be a failed creation. He discarded it carelessly in the beast glades, convinced that anyone weaker would mistake it for nothing more than a simple walking stick. The thought that the weapon could somehow end up with the boy was beyond his understanding. The outcast begins meticulously calculating the chances with intense focus. Arthur, often labeled as a nerd, wondered aloud why the sword was considered a failure, since to him, it appeared to be the most impressive weapon he had ever encountered. Ren feels insulted when Arthur likens his unique blade to the basic weapons once used by humans. He had once crafted the sword so that anyone could wield it, but now he doubted whether that had been wise. To him, it seemed to be nothing more than an ordinary, sharp instrument. The situation seemed even more intriguing because of recent events. Winsome wondered whether Ren would now agree to the request concerning the child. Arthur found himself bewildered once again, a state so familiar that even the narrator had grown weary of mentioning it repeatedly. Winsome explained to the boy that he had been assigned to this new teacher for two specific purposes. The first was to assess how he performed in real fights, and the second was to have Ren create a weapon for him. He now possessed a sword that surpassed his current weapon in power. Arthur's eyes lit up with anticipation at the thought of receiving a new sword, but Ren quickly clarified that his talents went beyond simple forging. He crafted swords from scratch. He consented to the training process because he was repaying a debt too. However, that obligation never required him to craft a new weapon for someone he considered beneath him. At the moment, he planned to hold onto Arthur's sword for some time. Ren felt no desire to take the weapon from Arthur, knowing that the weapon had already chosen Arthur, no matter who had made it. Drawing upon his abilities, summoned a sword, causing it to rise from the earth below him. The weapon was given to the boy to help him train, designed specifically to track how he moved and to study the force and accuracy behind every swing he made. Arthur could hardly believe he had managed to call forth the sword. At the same time, Ren believes the child remains completely unaware of the true extent of his abilities. He instructs the boy to give him the feather temporarily. Arthur, however, clutches the feather protectively, unwilling to let it go. Ren grew increasingly frustrated, feeling burdened by the constant need to clarify everything for the child. Arthur handed over the feather, then received instructions to take some time to recover and regain his strength. The unfortunate boy discovered that he would have to spend the night exposed to the cold, desolate mountain wilderness. Ren and Winsome relaxed together, burdened by their personal concerns. In their minds, Arthur deserved this experience, believing that he would eventually have to adapt to the tough realities of war regardless. The two Usuras offered their insincere well wishes to the boy, their words dripping with sarcasm. In an instant, they disappeared, abandoning the child to survive on his own. That night, Arthur lay inside a poorly made tent he had assembled on his own. He used his clothes as a makeshift pillow. Startled, the boy jolted awake, accidentally bumping his head. He then dismantled the earth tent he had created. Without warning, one of the golems lunged and launched an attack. Caught off guard by the sudden ambush, Arthur skillfully blocks every strike that comes his way. Ren's irritating voice echoed in the background as he launched into a lecture about how dangerous war zones could be. This was the reason he was putting Arthur through rigorous training, making sure he grew accustomed to battling in the harshest conditions imaginable. At a moment no one could have predicted, it happened. He insists that the boy remove his clothes. Arthur quickly undressed and immediately entered the realm heart physique state. His objective is to focus on the golem generals marked by the crowns atop their heads. Without hesitation, the boy swiftly cuts down the monsters, showing no hint of compassion. He unleashed a surge of electricity at a nearby golem, reducing it to nothing in an instant. To Arthur's astonishment, he notices several white golems battling on his behalf. The purpose of this is to symbolize the companions who fought alongside him during the real conflict. Because of this advantage, he would constantly face a choice. He could launch aggressive attacks to crush his opponents, or he could focus on protecting his teammates and ensuring their survival. Despite his weakened condition, the boy managed to complete the challenging quest, defeating every golem he encountered along the way. Overcome by fatigue, he sinks to the ground, unable to remain standing any longer. Ren observed that his forces had lost 271 soldiers, which amounted to almost half the number of his opponent's losses. The win came with its risks, particularly since some of the golems nearby were fragile. He had faltered only by failing to save his companions. Arthur often boasted boldly, but whenever he was faced with the tempting sight of tasty food and refreshing water, all his bravado vanished and he stood motionless. He eats the snack as the instructor collects his report. The boy struggles to view the rock golems as his companions, making him feel less motivated to help them. Ren appreciated the assistance and hoped the child would go back to sleep. His struggles would only grow more difficult from this point forward, leaving him feeling utterly drained and weary. The boy closes his eyes, and in a moment that seems to last only an instant, he rises early the following morning at the. A terrifying demon could be seen gripping by the throat, its intentions clearly deadly. After receiving that tip, the intense instructor's attitude shifted dramatically, surprising everyone with how quickly he ramped up his energy. The elf urgently seeks assistance. Without hesitation, Arthur plunges into a motionless void, endangering his own well-being in a desperate attempt to rescue her. He drew back his arm for a powerful swing and brought his blade down, slicing into his opponent's arm. After rescuing the graceful elf, the assailant prepared for another strike. The demon swiftly avoided the attack and quickly moved away, preparing to counter. The creature responded by launching a relentless series of attacks. Arthur immediately shifted into the powerful Realm Heart physique state. He neutralizes each assault by unleashing his own elemental power. The spear flew directly toward. The boy decides to take the chance and triggers the static voice once more. He hurt his own hands in an effort to shield from the threatening assault. Arthur's attempt to block the attack fails, leaving him face to face with the demon, who towers over him with a menacing presence. The child stopped joking and let out a fierce yell, furious at Ren for confusing him. Not long after, the magical disguise vanished from each of the puppets. The instructor did not expect the boy to respond with such speed. Initially, he had intended to prolong the battle in order to observe more of Arthur's responses. The boy felt little surprise, already familiar with the reputation of this ruthless instructor. Ren clarified that he chose this strict approach to help the boy, since the boy had overexerted his abilities by focusing all his energy on rescuing a single elf. There was a real possibility that his actions on the battlefield might endanger his own life. Arthur realized that although his choice wasn't ideal, he acted out of a deep sense of loyalty, valuing the safety of others above his own well-being. Ren expressed disapproval of the boy's impulsive actions, pointing out that acting for someone else didn't excuse his lack of caution. When Ren mentioned the word mate, the boy's cheeks reddened, and he hurried to clarify that was not his romantic interest. Ren felt a jolt of surprise, having assumed she and the boy had already crossed that line. Meanwhile, Arthur's face lit up with a bright blush, radiating pure embarrassment. He quickly changed the subject, refusing to admit to anything. As he did so, he noticed that Ren possessed a remarkable ability to manipulate the earth, shaping it into anything she wanted, like the chair she had just created. The sole restriction he could think of was his inability to replicate the characteristics of water with earth. He found himself intrigued, eager to understand how Arthur had realized the demon was an imposter. The boy clarified that he had noticed shifting yellow particles surrounding both puppets, and had figured out the truth by using logical reasoning. Arthur then wondered aloud whether beings of lower status might one day achieve the sophisticated control over mana that currently only Asuras possess. Ren insists that such an event is nearly impossible, yet reassures the boy that he has no reason to be concerned, since the boy himself seems to defy what most would consider impossible. He possessed the rare skill to sense the 4 primary elements as well as a few unusual variations. In addition, he could detect ether, a gift that only had been able to bestow upon him. Everything about the boy stood out as strange and unusual. Even the most powerful gods could not compare to the odd mix of misfortune and skill he possessed. Arthur felt a surge of happiness upon hearing those words and eagerly requested information about the next mission. Ren reached out to hold the boy's hand and began to describe the nature of a mineral. Although this mineral was uncommon, it served little purpose by itself. However, when combined properly through synthesis, it had the potential to produce something remarkable. He recalled mentioning his ability to produce swords without traditional forging, revealing that the real secret lay in a small gem. The process reminded him somewhat of cultivating a tree, though it was also quite different. Typically, Ren wished he could observe Arthur's training for several years before offering any real advice. However, given the current situation, he realized he would need to take a risk and make a decision now. Right as Arthur prepares to challenge the absurd statement, the man suddenly digs the pointed mineral into his own palm. Ren revealed that he had combined the mineral with one of his feathers, ensuring it became permanently connected to Arthur. Every idea he had, every move he made, and every shift in his body would play a role in shaping his new weapon. Right now, not even Ren could predict what it would turn into. The boy clutched his head in confusion, wondering why they had to choose the risky path. He finds it unexpected that Ren is genuinely going through with making the weapon. The instructor realized that his current stick would not suffice against actual deities, and understood that time was quickly running out. Arthur's heart sinks as he discovers that the war is set to arrive in less than 2 years, filling him with dread. Winsome had recently received information from about the current situation however, the mineral remained unstable, often requiring up to 5 years before it could be transformed into a weapon. Despite everything, it was clear the boy had to prepare himself for the approaching conflict. Ren appeared more unsettled than normal, a fact that did not escape Arthur's notice. The surprising truth was that the conflict had already started, catching everyone off guard. Arthur's body trembled as he processed the news, stunned by what he had just learned. In his mind, there should have been 2 years remaining. Surprisingly, it had already arrived. Arthur quickly realizes that he must go back to his own continent. He was obligated to enter the battle on behalf of. All at once, a golem's hands clamped down on his legs, holding him in place. Ren states that the inevitable outcome of his battle is death. Arthur insisted that he had spent countless hours preparing himself to confront the monsters. The only reason he arrived was for this purpose. However, both Ren and the boy are aware that his training hasn't yet been finished. At this point, he wouldn't even pose a threat to a retainer. Ren asked the boy to give him a year. During the course of a single year, he planned to prepare him to grow powerful enough so that the continent might have hope of survival. Arthur clenched his jaw and reluctantly agreed to the terms. They wished the year would hurry by. They had not traveled to in quite some time. Sat among the council members, determined to advocate for joining the upcoming war. Firmly turns her away, making it clear he does not accept her. Also agreed with that decision. At this point, assigning to the front lines would pose too great a risk and serve no real purpose. The princess contended that if she failed to act, many innocent people might lose their lives. Although her abilities had grown, she still lacked the strength to handle the situation alone. The situation leaves her feeling upset and storms off in anger. Virion pressed his fingers to his temple, struggling with a pounding headache as he questioned whether this truly represented their best chance. Meanwhile, intervened, gently reminding the elder that played a vital role in Arthur's success. If she is deployed to the battlefield, the boy's progress will still be held back, regardless of the training he has received. Approach the gate guards directly as she entered the hall. They asked for the doors to be opened. Despite her intentions, they firmly resisted her efforts, believing that only held the authority to issue that order. Firmly stands by what she says, refusing to back down. Lance chooses to support the girl, using his position to reinforce her command. The guards channeled their abilities while questioning and about where they were headed. The princess indicated that her location was city. The teleportation gate stood prepared for use, yet both individuals recalled the importance of completing proper authorization procedures before proceeding outside. Wondered aloud whether needed to be there, but after finishing his training session, she realized she didn't actually mind his company. Had previously served as the human capital within the nation of Sapin. Students had been taught that this city was constructed at a location distant from and elven lands and far from thee as well. Despite the ongoing battles, this city stood as the most protected and fortified against conflict. Its strategic design made it nearly impossible to breach. After the war was declared a year earlier, King oversaw a complete reconstruction, transforming the city into an impenetrable stronghold. The structure had been reconstructed with the strength to withstand a war with the neighboring continent. The scene reveals the cadets preparing themselves for the upcoming battle. Tells the girl to make sure her sword is ready at all times. Remained puzzled, unable to grasp the reason behind her concern, especially since she was under the protection of a lance and living within the security of the city's safest walls. Who had mastered the art of combat, recognized the unpredictable nature of war, and knew the importance of staying prepared for anything at all times. As they walked past a shop, paused and turned to, wanting to know how the siblings were managing with their training. Put in a great deal of effort, yet his improvement remained barely noticeable. Compared to whose natural talent allowed her to advance quickly, his abilities seemed merely ordinary. Even the lance could not deny her remarkable skill. Gently points out his mistake, hinting at the remarkable abilities that Arthur possesses. The lance insists that he doesn't belong to the League of the Children, claiming instead that he exists in a separate class altogether. She finds herself curious about just how formidable he might grow following his training with the Asuras. Questioned whether their adversaries would ever manage to cross over to this side. Since lay to the west of it would seem that stood not far from hostile forces. Although this was accurate, it was also important to remember that the adversaries lacked a way to cross the sea separating them. Harbored suspicions that their enemies might use more cunning and covert tactics, like utilizing the secret teleportation gates scattered throughout the lands. With this approach, the clan had the potential to summon a massive army that would pose a significant threat. Felt a deep sense of frustration over how little they truly understood about those they were up against. Eventually, it was revealed that had managed to lift the curse that had prevented her from speaking about her homeland. Despite this, she still slipped into a coma. And her grandfather had become more distant lately, their interactions strained by the heavy responsibilities he was shouldering. The kingdom had lost both its king and queen. In response, the council worked tirelessly to win the people's loyalty and advised every city to get ready for the coming conflict. Lost in her own thoughts, accidentally collides with. She believes the person is likely an adversary. Without hesitation, a sword is quickly aimed at the target. Nerd Girl felt a surge of happiness when she spotted one of her classmates. She embraces warmly and acknowledges with a friendly greeting, gathers her scattered papers, expressing regret for her unexpected outburst. Suddenly remembers that she is pressed for time, prompting her to quickly return to her belongings. She needed to deliver the documents to Gideon, who had been seeking assistance from, and thought it would be a pleasant idea to accompany the others. Noticed tired expression and wondered aloud about how had been spending her time recently. The unfortunate girl deliberately avoids addressing her instructor as professor, unable to ignore how truly unhinged the man seems. She had repeatedly reached her breaking point while cleaning up after his mistakes. Playfully mocked the elf by calling her by her royal title, and soon discovered that the elf had felt trapped and stifled while living within the castle walls. Continued to jest, accusing her of acting like a pampered and entitled heiress. Both of them were deeply unhappy, each burdened by personal challenges that made their lives difficult. Hoped she would show some compassion toward Virion, recalling the events that unfolded in the aftermath of the city massacre. The group's concern for was well-founded. Over the last year, each of them had faced relentless challenges, leaving them with no choice but to rely on training as their sole path forward. Had faced many hardships lately, but after the enemy's recent assaults, she felt a strong desire to join the fight on the battlefield. Meanwhile, turned her attention to Arthur, wondering about his situation. Had been repeating the same two phrases about him over and over for the last 2 years, and now he finally discovered it. He repeatedly assures everyone that the boy is simply practicing and nothing else. When the conversation shifted to Elijah, grew visibly uneasy, her fingers nervously fidgeting as uncertainty clouded her thoughts. She honestly had no idea how Elijah was coping at the moment. They couldn't comprehend the reason behind his removal. Her mind replayed the moment he tried to protect her, and that memory was all that remained. As the group's conversation about the sensitive topic wrapped up, they reached the place they had been heading toward. Nervously fiddles with the handle before finally swinging the door wide open. Within the building, the air was thick with an unpleasant odor caused by the processing of minerals and raw materials. The workers themselves by shouting loudly at one another, clearly enjoying the heated exchange. Everything changes for the moment. The familiar sound of her cherished master's voice reaches her ears. The assistant had been eagerly waiting for. Gideon found himself in a foul mood once again, his irritation clear to everyone around him. Before anyone could start gossiping about him, the inventor appeared on his own and swiftly took hold of the notebook. He sat in silence, snapped the notebook shut, and muttered angrily about how things had turned out. He had already sent an official request to the council asking for a lance, and now he felt pleased to receive assistance from the most skilled among them. Wondered aloud about their destination. The area ahead was none other than the perilous edge of the Beast Glades. The group sets off, each person puzzled by the inventor's unusual urgency. Upon reaching their destination, Gideon advises the group to remain alert and cautious. From their vantage point high above, they notice the ship below. Arthur once devised a scheme to journey overseas by constructing a machine that ran on steam power. This development eventually resulted in the creation of the fully realized ship. Many believed it had sunk beneath the waves, lost to the depths of the sea. Reels in disbelief, realizing that what stands before her surpasses even in its monstrosity. The unpleasant inventor proved to be challenging and consistently avoided giving straightforward answers. Upon examining the ship, they noticed numerous bite marks scattered across its surface. It became clear to them that nothing human remained aboard. The ship stood deserted, leaving uneasy and filled with questions about its true purpose if it didn't belong to their group. Other than the renowned inventor, there seemed to be no one else capable of building such a massive vessel or abandoning it in the ocean. She notices who asserts that the interior has been completely ruined, suggesting that the destruction was a deliberate effort to erase all traces. This suggested that whoever had used the ship was trying to keep its existence hidden from others. Began to suspect that perhaps a rival of Gideon had somehow obtained his ship design and secretly constructed their own version. Yet that too seemed out of reach, since only moments earlier the ship had been completely underwater. Gideon discovered its existence solely because some adventurers happened to stumble upon it. Gideon points out that nothing at all was left behind by the crew. Whoever came aboard had a clear strategy, making sure to remove every last bit of the ship's cargo. Every path seemed to point toward a single outcome, one that felt compelled to verify. Once Gideon finished reading the report, he silently wished his suspicion would prove false, but the facts confirmed he had been right all along. He wished that the missing crew members from the first ship would come back safely, unharmed and together. However, upon careful inspection, he becomes certain that this vessel is not the genuine one. This revelation was certain to alter the course of the war completely. This development signified that had gained the ability to build vessels large enough to transport whole battalions over the sea. Virion slumped at his table, struggling to come to terms with the reality that the war had arrived far earlier than anyone had expected. Both the human king and queen felt a surge of frustration upon learning about what the inventor had uncovered. He had just received confirmation that the ship was owned by leaving him completely certain that it was not manufactured anywhere on the continent. In order to establish his credibility, he mentions that the ship stood as their sole and most treasured invention. He had intentionally set markers throughout his ship to identify it, but when they examined the vessel they had just discovered, none of those distinctive signs were there. The structure itself didn't match either, and the components used in its construction varied from what he remembered. Blaine rose from his seat, irritation clear on his face, though he knew there was little he could do at the moment. The human king lost his composure upon learning that their adversaries had assembled a formidable fleet of battleships. The conflict was about to escalate, since their enemies could now transport thousands of troops over the ocean with ease, preparing for a fierce assault. The situation had worsened for them, as spies had begun appearing within the borders of territory as well. Acting as the general takes his place among the group and turns to Lance, seeking her opinion on the subject at hand. Lance described the terms she had made with the genius inventor and came to the same conclusion as before. Considered the idea that they might try to mislead the forces, making them think an attack would come from the ocean. However, he quickly dismissed this thought, realizing that the powerful currents in the sea would likely have wrecked any ship attempting such a maneuver. The main issue they needed to think about was how much danger they faced. Mentioned that had a clear grasp of what was going on. She believed the aim to assemble their troops in the area and take control from that position. However, was also aware that was clever and had likely anticipated several steps in advance. Because of this, they would be forced to confront an assault coming from two directions at once. Unfortunately, the dwarves lacked any commanders to coordinate their defense and their troops were few in number. Blaine expresses a desire to accompany the Elven King and Queen on their upcoming journey to the land of dwarves, hoping to help settle the ongoing conflict. Virion supported the suggestion, knowing they would need every bit of assistance possible to face the danger that awaited them. He felt deep concern about both the ship being found and safety. When he hears a knock at the door, he allows to come in. It seemed that her grandfather had called her over because he wanted to have a conversation with her. He intended to reveal something significant to her. Reveals a single sign of the harsh battle that occurred only a few days earlier. 400 men entered the dungeon. Just a small number managed to return after the battle. Virion gave the order for the troops to descend, and his decision ultimately led to their complete defeat. The elder elf recognizes within himself the weight of irreversible decisions he made during the war, fully aware that some of his actions cannot be pardoned. Despite knowing her abilities would be useful on the battlefield, he felt a deep responsibility to protect his cherished granddaughter from any harm. Hoped would realize that, despite her impressive magical skills, her true strength could greatly influence the outcome of a battle. Despite her strengths, she faced the limitation of being only a single individual. The outcome of her future could be determined by even the slightest error. He had once believed he should shield her from the conflict, but now his perspective had shifted. After witnessing the harsh aftermath of battle, Virion challenged her determination and wondered aloud if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. In response, the courageous elf simply gave a confident nod, proving her unwavering readiness. Virion decides to test her resolve by initiating a duel, aiming to determine whether her statements hold any truth. Both sides fully grasped the established terms of the battle. Without hesitation, shifted into his altered form and charged at her, leading with his head in a bold assault. She swiftly evades his attack and lashes out with her vines, wrapping them tightly around him to hold him captive. She moved quietly, aiming to catch him off guard where he couldn't see her coming. He weaves through several vines, skillfully moving to avoid them as best as possible. His focus on evading the blows caused him to overlook strike coming from behind. He manages to deflect the attack just before it reaches him. He seized her by the arm and forced her down to the ground. Found safety as her vines formed a protective barrier around her. She gathered enough force to launch herself toward him with equal strength. Virion felt a sense of admiration upon realizing that her ability to command her beast would become stronger. The two opponents exchanged blows with matching strength, neither gaining an advantage over the other. Intensified the fight, her vines twisting around her and beginning to consume her form. Recalling the events from before, began to feel a surge of concern as he thought about his granddaughter. This time, however, the outcome changes. She finds herself in a unique condition, reminiscent of the way Arthur appears whenever he triggers his phase transformations. Mysterious markings gradually form across her face. She carried 2 blades, one in each hand, ready for battle. With newfound strength, bombarded Virion with a flurry of swift strikes, leaving him unable to keep up. Despite the intensity of the moment, the experienced elder manages to match the pace effortlessly. Blows were exchanged between them, each attack leaving fresh scratches on their bodies as they matched each other's intensity. As the battle intensified, struggled to hold onto her transformed state, realizing she could not sustain it much longer. She collapses to the ground, rendered unconscious after a powerful kick lands squarely on her face. The elderly man defeated without any tricks, leaving her feeling humiliated as she stood up, realizing she hadn't managed to strike him even once. Witnessing her in that vulnerable state, silently hopes she will recall that, when they are on the battlefield, he will be the one leading her as her commander. This essentially showed that, in his view, she had met all the requirements to succeed. She felt more joyful than she ever had before and expressed her gratitude to him. However, the elderly man had his own set of requirements before agreeing. Before anything else, he requires that she obtains permission from each of her parents. Next, he expects her to make every effort to avoid causing trouble for her teammates. Lastly, he explains that if she fails to look after herself, she will be dismissed from the team. Overcome with excitement, eagerly agrees to all of his conditions without hesitation. Gently touched her own temple, cautioning the other girl to keep her distance from her during the second phase, since she had not yet gained complete control over her transformed state. Had explained to her that the Elderwood Guardian she had merged with was unlike the rest, though the reason behind this difference remained unspoken. Remains determined to hold back her second phase unless the situation becomes truly desperate. Reached out to her, firmly stating that he no longer considered himself her grandfather. From this point forward, he would see her only as a soldier. He emphasized that, because of this new relationship, she needed to realize immediately that she was expected to obey every command he gave, regardless of how challenging it might be. He gave the girl one last chance to withdraw from the conflict. Instead, quickly moves forward and wraps her arms around him in a warm embrace. She nodded to her commander in affirmation. She would prove to be a dependable ally, offering steadfast support to the continent. Having finished exchanging greetings, Virion remained concerned about her well-being, though he kept his worries to himself. In the following scene, the elderly elf descended into the deeper sections of the castle. At this moment, he encounters Anna as she tends to the director, who remains unconscious. Anna summarizes her current state, noting that Good Sky remains stable even while unconscious. They remained unsure about any possible method to restore her. Faced with uncertainty, Virion chose to follow his usual course of action. He welcomed her and began discussing the latest developments regarding the army. They had stumbled upon a battleship, something that even he believed had no knowledge of. Aside from his usual reasons, he had arrived to share important news with her. In an uncharacteristic move, he had granted the authority to join the war effort. Couldn't help but laugh as he remembered the outrageous things he had said. Despite his age, fear gripped the elderly man. He recognized just how headstrong his granddaughter could be. Because of this, he chose to join the war, but only if he could be closely monitored. Overwhelmed by his feelings, sank under the weight of his emotions. After relinquishing his role as the Elven King, he now faced an even greater burden than he ever had before. Each day, he dedicated himself to rigorous training alongside a skilled Asura, determined to build his strength and maintain his fitness. He understood that the upcoming war would demand his greatest efforts if was going to make it through alive. Despite everything, Virion felt reluctant. He wished to avoid becoming involved in the complicated situation unfolding around him. His only concern was to spend his remaining days peacefully while watching mature and gain strength. The thought of having to send his beloved granddaughter off to battle was something he never believed would happen. The members of the Royal Council put forth their utmost effort to fulfill their responsibilities. Yet, despite all these attempts, the situation remains unchanged. All of them relied on Virion to give them direction, since had decided that Virion was the best choice to guide the three races. Virion trembled beneath the immense burden placed upon him, feeling the heavy responsibility of leadership after losing his beloved wife. Grief lingered in his heart and a deep-seated fear grew within him. The thought that he might one day survive not only his children but even haunted his mind. Determined, he resolved to do everything in his power to keep that future from becoming reality. Taking her soft hand in his own, he expressed regret for realizing the truth too late. He always sensed when things were amiss. His attempt to lift the curse from her had only been partially successful. She had endangered herself to reveal secrets about the continent and the clan. Unable to prevent her actions, he ultimately bore the blame for her downfall. His resolve shattered under the weight of intense remorse, overwhelmed by the guilt of what he had done to her. He recalls the joyful moments they once experienced during their friendship. Despite the widespread resentment toward her role as a spy, he had never seen her in that negative light. He believes that deep down, her heart is filled with incredible strength. With the war looming on the horizon, he understood that this visit could be his final one, yet was determined to assure her that once the conflict ended, he would dedicate his every effort to ensure she regained consciousness. As the intense emotions finally settled, attention shifted to eager anticipation building to witness how she would fare in the upcoming battle. The team put forth their utmost effort, determined to keep her safe and unharmed, knowing that her grandfather would scold them if anything happened to her. Despite her unassuming appearance, the girl possesses remarkable strength and handles her responsibilities with ease. Wondered whether the boss monster had been found, feeling overwhelmed by the endless wave of guerrillas, while the sharpshooter did everything he could to hold them back. One member of the group suggests that they should withdraw and regroup. Confident in her decision, instructed her team to retreat for the time being. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that they had no intention of letting these fiends escape, directed to unleash his full strength as she focused on restraining the creatures. She skillfully manipulated her vines to trap everyone together in a single area, demonstrating her technique known as Ivy Prison. Prepared his propulsion blast for the next move. A powerful beam of energy bursts forth. With overwhelming force, she destroys everything across the field. All the monsters lay defeated, and his team emerged as the clear winners. Standard worked on inventing new ways to combine spells, though each attempt left his body aching from the harsh recoil. Carria playfully mocked him for his lack of training, though her words were filled with genuine care. The group shared a moment of laughter before directed their attention toward the upcoming task. The group's ravenous hunger was impossible to ignore. Their attention was now focused on the lunchbox that belonged to Carria, struck across the face after he bothered their leader. The young man remained remarkably calm and casually referred to her as Shorty. The boy's teasing nature became evident as he singled out, poking fun at his lack of height. As the two exchanged playful insults about their statures, the banter between them grew even livelier. Intends to point out that, given the current conditions of the dungeon, no one in the group could be mistaken for a supermodel. At that moment, she longed desperately for the chance to take a shower. The group moved forward together. As they approached the safety camps, a gate swung open to welcome them back, reminded the others to take some time to clean up and get ready. She mirrored their actions and returned to rejoin her friends. Felt happy watching the two of them grow closer and become more at ease with one another after spending 3 months together. Without warning, Helen called out to her. The two embraced warmly, cherishing the fond memories they shared. Went on to present the rest of her friends, making sure to mention the members of Jasmine's group as well. Ever the notorious playboy confidently approached the striking woman and began to flirt with her without hesitation. She found herself captivated by the striking confidence and charm that defined both sides of her personality. Observed as his entitled personality began to show, even though his magical abilities were impressive. Carria came from the Reedy family, a group celebrated for their impressive mastery of gauntlet skills and exceptional control over mana. And Carria each carried painful memories from their troubled family backgrounds. This similarity helped them understand one another easily. Meanwhile, stood out as someone who enjoyed charming women above all else, with watching over Carria coming in as a lesser priority. Carria maintains a striking sense of optimism, even though she has endured a painful history. The elf princess believed that Carria played a crucial role in holding the group together. As Jasmine watched the others interact, she couldn't help but think of Arthur, and this was what embarrassed her more than anything else, while the rest of the group burst out laughing. The unusual crossbow immediately draws attention. It turned out that the boy had this specially crafted so he could make use of his unusual abilities. Standard possessed the unique ability to embed spells within beast cores. It was both incredibly impressive and costly at once. His evaluation stood out from everyone else's. He arrived with Gideon, the inventor famous for his rare dual affinities as a stage of dark yellow magic. Even though struggled with a weak mana core, he embraced both his unusual abilities and the sense of value they gave him, feeling pride in his differences. Took pride in the fact that her group was one of the youngest units serving, all of them risking their lives to protect their nation while still so young. Overall, their division had managed to hold up fairly well so far. The situation left her curious about what Helen's team had been doing during that period. She revealed her disappointment as she explained that they had only recently come back from the border. The struggle at that location had been intense, which led to their assignment as scouts in this new area. Aware of the looming threats, she felt compelled to alert them about the peril that awaited. Filled with curiosity, wonders aloud about the events the others observed at the wall. The sadness and disappointment were so overwhelming that nobody in the group could find the words to speak. Recoils in shock, her mind racing with concern as she wonders aloud whether they had already confronted the mages in battle. They had indeed been present, spending several months battling in the area and had established their base of operations at the wall. The primary concern in that place wasn't the mages. Instead, the real problem stemmed from the monsters that continually caused them difficulties. The leaders had ordered this group to handle a dangerous S-class that had mutated. The mana beast was revealed to be controlled by the army, who, through an unknown method, commanded thousands of such creatures to do their bidding. The monster needed to be taken down swiftly, or else the army would break through the wall. The mutants, once rulers of their own dungeons, had fallen under the control and corruption of the. Through the use of these twisted creatures, they were able to command hundreds of beasts to serve their purposes. Because of the presence of these mutant creatures, facing other mana beasts became increasingly difficult. Several teams were sent far into the depths of the dungeons with the mission to find and eliminate the mutant creatures. These operations began prior to the onset of the army's assault. Coincidentally, the dungeon assigned to her and her squad was the same one where they ran into a powerful S-class mutant beast. Their survival depended on emerging victorious from that battle. His curiosity grew as she wondered about the battles taking place at the wall, in response to her interest. Adam, feeling irritated, points out to her that what they saw was far more than an ordinary story. The conflict raged on, bringing brutal suffering to everyone involved. Shot Adam an angry look, showing that she fully grasped what war could bring. Her interest was driven by a desire to ready herself and her team for the upcoming battles. Adam's tense encounter is abruptly interrupted when the striking steps in, suggesting that everyone pause the conflict and focus on establishing their campsite for the time being. Helen suggested too that she shouldn't let the guy's comments upset her, explaining that he was probably acting that way because his day had been particularly difficult. His group had become skilled at battling mana beasts, but the soldiers posed a far greater threat than any of the local creatures. While the beasts fought only to live, the soldiers existed solely for the purpose of destruction. Standard, puzzled by this, asked for clarification. Jasmine believed that in any conflict, nothing was more valuable than information. She thought that both sides were constantly working to uncover secrets from each other, always searching for an advantage. This also involves enduring captivity and pain in order to achieve their goals. Fighting in this place felt simple, since the only clear goal was to defeat the monsters, making everything straightforward. However, when they faced opponents who shared the same capacity for pain, the situation grew more complex than they had ever imagined. Deciding who holds the moral high ground during a war often proves impossible, and this uncertainty keeps everyone trapped in a cycle of confusion. Hesitated with a question on her lips, but before she could speak, an injured individual stumbled back, desperately pleading for medical help. Helen wonders aloud whether they have fallen short in handling situations like this. However, it seemed that refused to acknowledge anything like that. Later at the treatment camp, approached and asked if she might have gotten hurt. He notices Helen among the crowd and offers her a polite greeting. Wondered what might have brought her to this place, his curiosity piqued by her unexpected arrival. Elder is already aware that the princess's visit is driven by a search for information, and affirms this understanding. Helen realized her mistake and expressed regret for interrupting so abruptly. Her main concern was to relay information to her superiors stationed at the wall. Helen believed that approaching the sleeping prince directly would be the quickest solution. At that moment, he remained knocked out cold, and it seemed likely he would need some time to regain consciousness before anyone could get the information they needed from him. Standard grew curious about the young man's condition and sought an explanation. The medic explained that the boy had endured days without food or water, leaving him severely dehydrated and in poor health. His battered feet reveal the toll of his desperate, relentless escape. The real mystery at hand was what exactly he had been fleeing from. Without warning, the man stirred from sleep, his expression shadowed by gloom. He wondered about the length of time he had been unconscious, but since just 10 minutes had passed, he decided it wasn't anything serious. Offers him water so he can regain his strength. Understands how difficult this conversation is, but he believes it's important for them to hear his perspective and learn what his team went through. Sayer's hands clenched the fabric tightly, frustration evident in his movements. Overwhelmed by sorrow, he mourned the teammates he had lost. He was the sole survivor. After a brief argument with his teammates, the young man chose to remain behind while the others moved on. He hesitated, guilt weighing on him for abandoning his friends, and ultimately chose to follow after them once they had gone. When he arrived, a terrifying scene unfolded before his eyes. The group found themselves suddenly surrounded by fierce creatures more dangerous than any the boy had previously encountered above. Several among them carried artificial weapons, and the unfortunate man witnessed his entire squad being completely destroyed. With no escape routes left, he did everything he could to conceal himself and avoid being noticed. His survival depended solely on a stroke of luck. He spent several days attempting to remain out of sight until, at last, taking a risk, he constructed a portal that would allow him to leave the area instantly. Despite the danger, he realized the might completely demolish it, prompting him to flee desperately to save himself. Felt uncertain about the teleportation gate he had constructed and wished for a better understanding of how it worked. His heart pounded with fear at the thought of admitting that a massive door stood behind the monsters, its presence suggesting that the creatures were fiercely guarding something important. He felt a wave of terror as he delivered the news that the S-Class mutants' hideout had finally been discovered. A short time later, his booming voice echoed throughout the cavern as he informed the group of the location. He checked to make sure everyone was present. Hundreds of soldiers themselves, bracing for the approaching battle. Still just a kid, had contributed plenty during his time there. This time the battle was serious. They were up against their true opponent, a genuine mutant they had to confront. He noticed the obvious signs of anxiety on his teammates' faces. Although was the youngest member of the group, she maintained an air of calm confidence, her expression composed as she led the team. The princess made a small adjustment to her appearance. He found himself watching her for much longer than was typical. Bro realizes that the girl he likes is far beyond his reach and already has feelings for Arthur, so he makes an effort to move past his own emotions. The standard highlights how insignificant the beast they battled was compared to the far more terrifying creatures lurking elsewhere. Whenever Keria suddenly appeared and caught him off guard, he would immediately slip into full geek mode. She mentioned to him that it might be a good idea for him to begin stretching. Realizes that her actions come from concern for his well-being, and he quietly agrees with her intentions. The vanguard team stood assembled in neat rows, awaiting instructions, with positioned at the front as their leader. She cautions the group, urging them to prepare themselves because the real fight is about to begin. The people remained unaware of the perilous creatures lurking beyond the gate. Confidently steps forward, reminding her team that a satisfying meal awaits them once they finish clearing the dungeon. To them, the situation appeared to carry an ominous sense of doom, almost as if it were a sign of impending disaster. With that thought in mind, they moved on. The vanguard teams took their designated places, preparing themselves before charging forward into the fray. As soon as the gate was crossed, a scene of utter carnage unfolded. Recoiled in terror as he saw countless soldiers being mercilessly killed. Put all his effort into staying on pace as he hurried along. Keria felt a wave of dismay upon realizing that another trusted ally had been lost. Despite the intense struggle, they managed to persevere. Realizes too late that he has been caught off guard. Keria notifies him that a monster is in the vicinity. While he focused on reloading, Keria rushed forward to shield him until he was ready again. Manages to take down 3 monsters by himself. Skillfully mocks the child, pointing out how little help he has been. Keria found herself facing serious danger and urgently signaled for assistance. Moved forward to rescue her as Standard focused on handling the monsters on his side. Keria launched an aggressive attack, using her gauntlets to forcefully break through any obstacles in her path. Controlled her ivy prison, trapping every monster inside its thick, twisting vines. Charges forward with an energy that nothing can hold back. She sliced through the swarm of monsters with ease. Afterward, she directed to herd the beasts into a single location. Once they were gathered, she gave the signal to proceed. Unleashed a crossfire spell that created a blazing barrier, driving a wedge between the advancing monsters and the defending soldiers. The remaining adventurers focused their efforts on raising sharp pillars of earth from the ground. A surge of wind and flames merged together, sweeping through and obliterating the monsters lurking below. Gripped tightly using her vines while Keria steadied herself with her gauntlets and relied on his flames for support. Observing the situation gives a silent cue, trusting the long-distance marksman to complete the task. Joined the others, focusing on readying a cannon as his fellow mages launch their spells from a distance. He instructs his team to clear the way so that can take his shot. The boy gathers an immense amount of orange energy and unleashes it in a powerful beam, reminiscent of a. Upon striking the monsters, the red blast detonates violently, obliterating all that lies in its path. Surveyed the scene that remained after the assault. A deep hole now marked the spot where the ground had been struck. He instructed the healers to take their places and signal by lifting their flags. Then, he directed his remaining troops to bring the wounded over to the medical team. Felt a deep sense of pride as he observed how much Standard had improved. The leader rejoiced over the incredible triumph. Even after facing an onslaught from a whole army of mana beasts, the group made the choice to press onward. The focus rested on the things had said. Does not believe the outcome was a sweeping win. He found it impossible to view anything as a triumph, knowing that so many of their soldiers had died. 10 individuals had already died before reaching the end of the S-Class beast, making the number more than just a statistic. The uncertainty lingered over how many more people would lose their lives before the raid finally ended. Watched as the wounded received care and their injuries faded, yet an uneasy feeling lingered within her, leaving her unsettled by the scene. Standard notices this as well. He looks at her with concern and inquires about the reason for her distress. The elf acknowledged their victory, yet she couldn't help but feel pain over the loss of their soldiers. Approached and mocked her gentle attitude toward the common people, making light of her kindness. Reached out, taking her hand firmly, and made it clear that they had given everything they had to achieve that win. Standard supported the claim, acknowledging that entering a battle always involves a certain level of risk. They were unable to rescue every soldier, and that was simply the truth of the situation. However, he had failed to express it properly. Frustration deepened as she listened to the comment. Standard attempts to apologize, but the princess feels anxious, fearing she might never reach the same skill level as Arthur. Even Carria realizes that the conversation is centered around the mysterious boy she constantly mentions, though she doesn't seem to know why she can't stop bringing him up. Felt a surge of frustration, unable to recall anything about Arthur except for his reputation as someone both influential and charming, seemingly flawless. The way she described Arthur made it obvious that her opinion was slanted. Carria suspects that the green-haired's envy stems from his own desire to be like Arthur. Despite his popularity at school, he could never bring himself to acknowledge it. The teasing persisted, especially when admitted that she had felt intimidated by him during their initial meeting. Carria recalls with clarity the moment when the woman explained their narrow escape from a group of slave traders. At that moment, believed Arthur hadn't rescued her out of kindness. Instead, she suspected his actions were driven by practicality. Upon hearing those words, Carria concludes that he is a troublemaker who acts however he pleases. Consumed by jealousy, dismissed Arthur's successes as insignificant. Memories surfaced of the time had been abducted at the academy and remembered that Arthur had failed to visit her afterward. In response, she bursts out in frustration, pointing out that he had already inquired about her well-being through Virion, yet had quickly departed to deal with his own affairs. Fueled by jealousy, keeps portraying Arthur in a negative light. And Carria both attempt to intervene, hoping to prevent him from speaking carelessly about topics he clearly doesn't understand. He goes so far as to accuse Arthur of being a coward who fled from danger. Unable to contain her irritation, firmly rejects these claims. In her heart, she knows Arthur may have his flaws, but fear has never been one of them. He cares about his family and friends so much that he would never leave them behind without a good reason. Walked off, continuing to tease her about the person she liked. Even questioned whether Arthur truly possessed any remarkable abilities, yet assured everyone that he was incredibly powerful. Carria eagerly looked forward to meeting this person face-to-face, while felt even more delighted at the prospect of introducing them to him in the near future. They sensed an uneasy feeling in the air, certain that this would turn out to be one of those ominous moments that hinted at trouble ahead. The mages had already risen and begun investigating the more hidden sections of the den. The atmosphere remains eerily silent, prompting to use hand signals to communicate with the others. He indicates that they are approaching the location where his group was destroyed by the mana beasts. According to the report, it was clear that they would encounter hundreds of orcs and other monsters nearby. He wants the team prepared for the challenges ahead. They silently hoped that everyone would make it through the battle unharmed. Led his men forward in a powerful charge, only halting when they reached a certain point. He scanned his surroundings carefully, assessing everything happening around him. The young man stared in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how every single monster had been defeated. A wave of fear and confusion swept through the soldiers, leaving them unsure whether to rejoice or feel terrified. After making up his mind to proceed, gestures for the group to follow him as they head toward the door. The group moves closer to the enormous door. Signaled to her teammates, reminding them to keep their positions in the formation. The door revealed yet another unsettling surprise. It remained open. This suggested that either a person or an object had already entered. Commanded his soldiers to unlock the object while his weapon in anticipation. Within the stronghold, the lifeless bodies of countless monsters lay scattered, their thick blood slowly seeping through the entrance. The group of adventurers suddenly stopped moving, trying to adapt to the unexpected turn of events. steps forward to get a better look at the situation unfolding before her. As she examined the scene more carefully, she noticed a lone man standing over the countless fallen beasts. Arthur, known for his unmatched strength and presence, sat with a chill demeanor that seemed untouchable, exuding an aura of absolute confidence. The princess was stunned, unable to comprehend how he could be standing there before her. The group of adventurers stands ready, determined to face any challenge that might appear before them. Despite the others hesitating, eagerly leaps forward, determined to reach the princess. Believed was a threat, but his worries faded when clarified that posed no danger to them. He shouted fiercely at the man perched atop the pile of monster bodies, insisting on knowing who he was.